Now watch this drive.
Welcome back to the Highly Original Podcast. I'm Joe Martino.
And I'm Parker Danks.
And we have a special episode for you guys. It's the Easter special. We have a guest here, Father Tom Gardner.
Yes, thanks for having me, Joe and Parker.
Yeah. Father is he's a Catholic priest for the Archdiocese of Philadelphia, as well as director of the Newman Center for the Westchester University of Pennsylvania. So kind of real quick, Father, you want to give us like a little kind of explain what it is you do as the director there?
All right. Yes. And one thing that you should mention, Joe, is that you are a proud
alumni. Yes.
Ram. So the Catholic Church tries to provide a presence for all the various communities, that are within our local church. So I'm part of the Archdiocese of Philadelphia, and within the Archdiocese of Philadelphia, most of the parish communities are parish communities for the towns and boroughs and townships that fall within our geographical region. So here in Westchester, there's a parish, St. Agnes, which also, Joe, is your home parish growing up,
if
I recall correctly. And so the parish of St. Agnes is there to care for the residents of Westchester. Now, Westchester, as many people know, at least around here, Parker's joining from Texas, so he doesn't necessarily know the local situation, but Westchester is a college town. We have Westchester University. So the Newman Center, it's spelled Newman for John Henry Newman, who was an English Catholic cardinal bishop. The Newman Center, the idea is that we are the Catholic Church's presence for the students of the university. So we're in close proximity to St. Agnes Parish, whereas they are trying to serve the local population. We are specifically here to serve the college students,
the student body of Westchester.
Right. So approximately 17,000 students enrolled at Westchester University, if you include the grad students as well. So it's a sizable population.
Yeah. And also to mention something about you, you and I, as previously mentioned on the podcast, played in an indie folk band together, the Concelebrants, where we played a show for some sort of fundraiser.
Aid for South Africa.
Okay, yes.
That's put on by the Honors College here at Westchester University. And
our one and only show.
Yeah, that was our one show. It was akin to the Beatles rooftop performance, but there was slightly less people for our performance than for that. But the Concelebrants, it's a little bit of inside baseball. But when we have our Catholic masses, our services, if there happens to be more than one priest serving at the altar, it's called concelebration. So one priest is celebrating a mass, multiple priests are concelebrating. So there was 5 of us in the band, and so we figured concelebrants would be an appropriate title because we were performing together. It wasn't a solo act. So there was I don't know why I'm struggling to.
No, I'll just shout them out.
Okay.
Claire, Mike, and Steve, if you're listening, we sure. Say hi.
Yeah, so there's 3 of them and the 2 of us. So yep, I was right about the 5.
There you go. So today, as I mentioned at the beginning, we have an Easter special for you guys. So Father Tom is here to join Parker and myself in talking about the 2014 biblical film, The Passion of the Christ, which of course was directed by Mel Gibson, and I believe co-wrote. He wrote it alongside a man by the name of Benedict Fitzgerald. It starred Jim Caviezel, Monica Bellucci, Maya Morgenstern, and Sergio Rubini, among others. And essentially, the film, how it ties to Easter, and in addition to being a major pop culture touchstone, I think Parker, you and I were probably a little bit young when it came out, but you actually were talking to me earlier. You do remember it coming out and wanting to see it, but your mother wouldn't let you because you were a little too young.
I was a little too young. I think I was in, I was in like the 5th grade, 6th grade when it came out. So like 11, 12, but still at that age, my parents were a little protective about what I watched, and they wanted me to go see it, but they said they'd prefer that it came out so they could watch it with me in our home. And they were just like,
Yeah,
it's pretty gruesome.
yeah,
So,
it's
oh,
definitely
and just to correct you real quick, Joe, this movie was actually released in 2004. I think you said 2014.
Did I? Okay.
Oh yeah, because I was like, did they make a part 2 that I'm not familiar
No.
with?
Thank you for catching me there.
Yeah, absolutely, man, for sure.
Yes, the 2004 film, and the basic synopsis is it is the final day of Jesus of Nazareth's life. Kind of starting with the what is called the agony in the garden, where Jesus was kind of facing that what was about to happen to him, and praying that perhaps there could be another way, which of course is his imminent execution at the hands of the Roman authorities. And it covers his trial by both the religious Jewish authorities, the secular Jewish authorities, and the Roman imperial authorities, as well as up to his crucifixion. Is so it's these final 12 hours of his life. And yeah, that's the basic rundown. It really does not, it includes some flashbacks and some parts that are maybe happen right before and after, but it really is linearly just those final 12 hours they really focus in on. So with that, guys, I want to open up our discussion, kind of starting out with which one of the main cast did you guys enjoy in their performance? And when I ask this question, I'm not asking like, oh, do they have to be a good person? If you guys found it's about the performance and the characterization. So it's not about who's a good guy, who's a bad guy.
Right.
So,
Right.
Parker,
Yeah.
let's start with you, and then Father.
Yeah, absolutely. This one was a pretty. As much as I do want to say the character of Jesus, I have to go with the Virgin Mary, who's played by Maya Morgenstern.
Yes.
Yes, and the reason why is I think they just casted the perfect actress to play the Virgin Mary. You can see it in her eyes the entire film that she is so traumatized seeing her son being brutally beaten and knowing that he has to be sacrificed. And knowing that she can't really do anything about it, especially when she's been given the towel to clean up the blood of Christ. You could just really see that she's just so to herself. And I think, and she's
almost like in a state of shock.
State of shock, but the actress did so well because she did a lot of movement with her eyes, because she's covered. What is that?
The veil.
Yeah, it's like a veil. And so her performance really stood out to me, and you almost just want to cry with her. And along with Mary Magdalene too, she also did an amazing performance right next to her as well. So,
and Parker, this is not my choice, but I definitely agree. And what I really like about this characterization of the Virgin Mary is she is depicted, I feel, like a real person. Because I think often we think of the Virgin Mary in the terms of like religious art, like just always praying and very symbolic looking. Whereas we see in the flashbacks, she is being cynical with her son about a piece of furniture he's making, and there's moments where she's more than just, I'd say, like a art. Do you remember the scene I'm referring to where she's got the table, she says, oh, these big tables will never catch on?
Yeah, she's just being a mom, and Christ is playing around with her, giving a kiss on the forehead, and
I really like that.
I like that too, Joe, because in the movie, like especially in Catholicism, Virgin Mary is all over, like in terms of art form. And I love art, so I think it's a great piece of art form. But when you look at the movie, you're right. She is just a human being. That's just the mother of Christ who's going through the most traumatizing moment of her life. So yeah, like I think she just did a really good job, and I applaud that actress for portraying the Virgin Mary perfectly.
And Father, how about you? Which of the main cast really stood out for you?
Sure, yeah, and as you were talking about how it came out in 2004, it took me back to the first time I saw the movie, which was I was in the seminary at that time. I was in seminary from 2002 to 2010, so it's pretty
Father,
early on in my
for people
seminary.
who don't know, seminary is.
Oh yeah. I am making a big presumption, speaking a lot of insider terminology, but seminary is the place you go to prepare for the priesthood. So you go through this process of formation at St. Charles Seminary, and I remember going. I was in there for 8 years. It was probably the third of my 8 years. It was year number 3, I think, when that movie came out, and we all went in our black suit and ties. We wore black suit and ties at that in seminary, and our black suit coats, white shirts, and black ties. About 150 guys walking into the movie theater on Lancaster Avenue, and I'll never forget it in Wayne because we moved a little. The seminary was on City Avenue and Lancaster Avenue, the corner there, and we were used to going so far down Lancaster Avenue to get to the Wayne movie theater. We had to move a little bit further west than we were used to. But I remember like the trepidation that I had going to see that movie because I knew it was going to be pretty gruesome. We really entered even before seeing it, even before it was released, it already had this sort of anticipation that it was really going to enter you into the passion story. So there was a little bit of, I was certainly eager to see it, but also a little bit of trepidation. And so the first time I watched it, and probably subsequently every time I've watched it, it's the character of Simon of Cyrene has been the one that stands out to me. That actor did an incredible job. He was, I just remember him. He's very tall in that movie. He's a very tall man, portrayed as like a foreigner, and very reluctant. He does a good job of expressing his reluctance, his desire to really insist. I'm just a passerby. I don't want anything to do with this situation. And yet, as he continues to accompany Jesus, he begins to get very. He obtains this sort of companionship with Jesus. That all of a sudden he wants to help him. And towards the end, there's a scene when Jesus falls the third time. Simon, encourages him. It says, we're almost there. So you see the change very quickly that happens as he accompanies Jesus. From being someone who doesn't care about Jesus and doesn't want anything to do with the situation to being someone who very quickly becomes a real companion of him, saying, I'm gonna, and he does insist on helping him get to the final spot,
Yes.
where they're going. So, that's the character that has stood out to me. As Parker, you were talking, I really began I didn't really appreciate all that stuff about the way that the Blessed Mother's portrayed, but yeah, I see, based on what you said, that kind of, I didn't think of it so much, but after you're talking about it.
Well, Father Tom, feeding off what you said about Simon of Cyrene, like the scene where I think Jesus falls for the third time, I really like the way the actor kind of expressed a little bit of aggression towards the Roman soldiers, where he said, "I've had enough. Leave him alone. I'm not carrying this cross unless you leave him alone, and we can get this done."
Right.
Like, you finally, because as the audience, we were trying to not jump through the TV and like protect Jesus, and that scene was just like, hey, I've had enough. I've just met this guy, and I still want you to stop beating the crap out of him.
Yeah.
So I really liked that. I think it was that moment where the audience got to speak up as well.
Right.
Yeah.
It's interesting because I think that's what struck me about him too was that I kind of connected with him given my experience of going to see this movie, where I was at in my seminary formation towards the priesthood, and you know, on the road to making that commitment to the priesthood, but not quite there yet. Still early on in my formation. Eager to see the movie, but still a little bit reluctant to see it and enter into it. I really connected with that character for those reasons.
Yeah. Um, I guess no, yeah, Simon the Serene was definitely a character that did stand out to me as well. But for me, I really was intrigued by the depiction of Pontius Pilate, who is the governor of the imperial governor of Jerusalem and I guess Palestine and Galilee. I don't know, you know what the province, the provincial area, and he's a Roman, he's a pagan, he's not from this land, but he's been tasked with governing these people, the Jewish people, who he doesn't really understand, and you see, and it's similar, I know, in the Gospels. He does not want to be part of this either. Um, but what I think is interesting, you know, one, like he's being asked to execute Jesus because only he has the authority as the imperial governor to do that. So the religious authorities, the Sanhedrin, have brought Jesus after their trial to have him executed, and Pontius Pilate really attempts to not have Jesus executed. But it's also interesting because at the same time, he's kind of apathetically brutal to him, because it's strange because like I think what we're also seeing in that scene is, in the scenes with Pilate, is that he's, you know, something of status and the old world morality. Like, they don't, Jesus is not a noble, so he doesn't have any reason to respect him, or, you know, he can be okay if he dies, and that's why he has him brutally scourged, and that's it's an attempt to actually not have him die. He's trying to appease the crowd that has formed in the I guess his palace, or the governor's mansion.
Yeah,
Um,
I think
but
they
yeah,
call it the Praetorium.
I've always found him to be an interesting part of the passion story in the Gospels, and as well as this film. Sort of a guy who's doesn't want to have Jesus killed, but at the same time is okay having an innocent man, someone he knows is innocent, beat up. He does have the authority to just set him free, but because of political reasons, he's not, because he's afraid that the Sanhedrin is going to incite a revolt, essentially.
Yeah, the Romans seem to be pretty preoccupied with maintaining a sort of status quo and keeping things calm. I'm not an expert on the history or the politics, but what I know of it is the Roman Empire really wanted to give the territories that they were occupying. They wanted to give them a degree of autonomy, as long as they were getting from them what they needed, and so there was a lot of pressure on Pilate to make sure that there was no civil unrest, that they maintained their Roman authority, but they kept a degree of peace. And it seems like Pilate got really unsettled when it looked like there was a riot to be about to be breaking out, and he, as much as he didn't want to have Jesus executed, he sort of felt like this situation was going to get to a point where he was going to be in a difficult spot, with his superiors. that seemed to be the struggle of the Romans all the time. Like the as an aside, the story of the Roman centurion who comes to Jesus and he says, like, I understand that you can perform this miracle because I am a part of this structure where I know that my men need to follow my orders and I need to follow the orders of the people above me. He kind of had an insight into Jesus, that Roman centurion from earlier in the Gospels, from the Passion. But that's a fascinating situation with them, that Pilate was put in. It's just amazing. He woke up that morning, no idea that what was coming his direction was going to have his name mentioned for centuries or millennia.
No, yeah, definitely. So kind of continue on that vein, because there are so many roles in this film. Who I want us to kind of go around with who our favorite supporting cast member is, to kind of help, because I felt that I didn't want to have us just talk about one character each. So again, Parker, we can have you start the round.
So I actually was going to mention Simon of Cyrene, but since we actually brought him up already, I kind of want to move on to a different character.
Yeah.
I was going to say, like, the character of Satan. I think he did a really creepy job with the baby and the torment of Judas. And I just found that in those scenes, you're getting this glimpse of a good, like, separation of evil and good in one scene, like when he's in the Garden of Gethsemane. Am I saying that right?
Yes.
Gethsemane, yeah.
Gethsemane, and he's praying to God, and he's saying, I know what's going to happen, and it's not good. I'm scared. And then you see Satan. It's like this parallel of good and bad. I don't know. I think just all the moments where Satan pops out of nowhere, you get the chills. And this is another shout out to the actor who played him.
It's actually an actress.
It was an actress?
The Italian actress. She's married to a famous Italian director, I believe.
I had no idea. Oh, wow. Okay. That's yeah. Like, the one part I didn't really understand, and maybe Father Tom, you could explain this to me, like towards the end, once Jesus passes over and dies, and the Roman soldiers go to see if he's actually been executed, and the water comes out of him and the Roman soldier gets on his knees. There's like a quick shot of just like Satan freaking out, and it minds up, like the camera shot. Do you know anything about that? That part was always so random to me in the film.
Right. Yeah, there's a deep theological reality that we believe about the moment that Christ's side was pierced and the water and the blood flows out. And I'm trying to be conscientious of my Philadelphia accent, not to say water, not water.
But
I guess it's to try to say something succinctly. We believe that Jesus was the new Adam. That Adam was the first. Is the first man created by God. Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, and when God created Eve, he took from the rib of Adam and created Eve. And so this man and woman being in the image of God, humanity being in the image of God, was first accomplished in Adam and Eve. Then we believe that they had committed that original sin and had fallen and had disconnected humanity from God. So when the soldier pierces the side of Jesus and that water and blood flows out, that's the new humanity, or that is being brought about by Jesus. That this restoration, the connection is made, reconnection with God. That the church is coming forth from the side of Christ. That is the way in which God is reconnecting with humanity. So that Eve was the bride of Adam, the church is the mystical bride of Christ, and that God has entered into our humanity through this person of Jesus Christ, and by his sacrifice, we have been given access to this connection with God. And so this is Satan's biggest nightmare, because, and there's a lot of, this is sort of, just throwing ideas out there, but one of the traditions of the church is that Satan started off as a good angel, and he just couldn't stomach the fact that in God's plan, God was going to share his life with humanity in the person of Jesus. So that for as magnificent and majestic as the angels are, God has decided to share his being with humanity, and that was something that Lucifer couldn't accept that, and so that's sort of starts his frenetic activity to try to disrupt that plan. So when that water and blood flow from the side of Christ, that's a particularly difficult moment for him, and I think that's what the movie's trying to depict, with him sort of freaking out like that.
So, Father, moving on to your favorite of the supporting cast.
Yeah, then I was thinking about that. There's a lot of different characters. I didn't realize it the first couple times I watched the movie that there's so many different sort of storylines going through. But one person that comes to mind is Pilate's wife, and how, because as Parker, you were talking about Mary, and then Mary Magdalene, and there's so many women involved in this story, and then their struggles through it. And there's a little vignette there about Pilate's wife and the struggle she goes through. She has a dream about this imminent situation that's going to come up, and she would rather that her husband not condemn him, because she's got this sense of foreboding. This is not a good thing. And there's a scene where she actually goes and helps Mary and some of the other women wipe up the blood that's left. And I thought that was a pretty poignant scene. So there's a lot of people that kind of come to mind, but I thought that's the one to bring up when for the show tonight.
Now, is that real quick? Is that in the Gospels that she?
That's actually in fact, yesterday, as we record this, yesterday was Palm Sunday, and we had the Gospel of Matthew, and it's a long passion narrative that we actually read at our Sunday service. And if I'm not mistaken, and I think this is true, that it is included in Matthew's Gospel that Pilate's wife had been troubled by a dream she had the night before, about this man who was going to come before her husband. So that is at least in one of the gospel accounts.
But the wiping up the blood is
that the wiping up of the blood is I think is sort of their creative license, or just their interpretation by the filmmakers. That part is, but there's a scene in the movie that where she's helping wipe the blood up. That is not included in the Gospels.
Okay. So I guess for my favorite side character, and this is actually, so I rewatched the film today actually in preparation, and I had watched it previously when I think when I was in high school, and I did not. I was kind of re-remembering this figure as I was watching, and that is the Roman soldier that is partaking in the execution of Jesus, and I believe in the film he's given the name Cassius, and he is a legionnaire, I guess, who kind of in the film it seems he's been assigned to crucifixion duty that day, and he's with Jesus, and he's not one of the Roman soldiers who's kind of sadistically enjoying the brutality of it. He's just sort of escorting him along, and he encounters Mary and Mary Magdalene and the Apostle John, and he discovers that Mary, that's his mother, and he begins to be moved with compassion, and he's not. I think we almost see through that journey he kind of comes to. I feel like we're sort of left to the impression that he becomes a follower of Jesus through this ordeal. We see as the crucifixion is going on, he's uncomfortable, and he it seems like he's feeling that there's something larger going on, or maybe something out of the ordinary. And Parker mentioned earlier that when Jesus is stabbed in the side, that is this soldier who does it, and it's this soldier who also offers Jesus, I believe, something to drink on a sponge.
Wasn't that vinegar, right?
In some of the gospels, they talk about it being, some sort of like vinegar that's put on the sponge, which was really no relief at all, but to Jesus. But some of the gospels, include that. But I think from my recollection, the movie's trying to depict this soldier as genuinely trying to help him.
And I've heard that the vinegar, I might be wrong, I might have misheard that it was like an anesthetic. It was intended to be some sort of anesthetic to kind of ease
the pain,
the process.
Yeah.
But we also see, with this soldier, he prevents the soldiers from breaking Jesus's legs, which they do to the two bandits or rebels. I know it varies in the gospel what they are, but they're also being executed next to Jesus. And why they're breaking their legs is because there seems to be an earthquake that has happened. So they're trying to get out of there, and they're trying to speed up the process of death, because I know with crucifixion, it's death by asphyxiation, and you're holding yourself up to save yourself, and once you slip, you choke. So it's kind of you're being held up until you let go and strangle yourself. And by breaking their legs, they can no longer hold themselves up. But the soldier stops it because he sees that Jesus is already dead, and he feels. It seems like he feels like, let's not brutalize his body in front of his mother. And then when I think part of it, to me, it's very kind of impactful, was when he does stab Jesus in the side and the water comes out and he falls to his knees. And it seems like it's a moment of realization for this soldier that this guy that he was executing is something greater than what he thought. And and there's also the other centurion who's also somewhat seems to be sympathetic, or not wanting to be so brutal about it, just kind of wanting to just execute him and have that be the end of it, not the added beatings and mocking. So that was a character for me. And I know in Christian tradition, I believe he's regarded as a saint, I think. And
yes, yeah. We have a tradition
that he converted to
right.
Christianity. So
right,
I like the depiction there.
Yeah.
So moving from that, kind of ask you guys, Parker, what would you say your kind of the favorite scene of the film is for you?
This one's an easy answer for me. And before I get into it, growing up, when I would go to church, when I would listen about the teachings of the Passion of the Christ, I was always so intrigued by the other two crosses, the men on the left and right of Jesus. Because to those of the listeners that aren't familiar with the teachings of the gospel or the New Testament, there's three crosses. There's like many symbols of three crosses. And it's been told that the guy on the left is mocking Jesus. The guy on the right is kind of on his side. And I believe the guy on the left is, correct me if I'm wrong, Father, but Gesmus, and then you have Dismas on the right.
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure of what the names are in the tradition, but
think that's
at least the good thief's name is something close to Dismas.
Dismas.
Yeah.
Well, during that, so Jesus has finally been whipped, and as the viewer, you're just wanting it to end since we all know the ending because you just feel so bad for him. And then when he gets hung up on the cross, it's Gesmus who mocks him and says, "Hey, if you're such a powerful Lord, why don't you step down from that cross and save yourself?" And then Dismas replies, "Hey, we deserve this. He does not. I have sinned, and my sins have now been justified. And you have every right to crucify me, but all I ask is you remember me when you make it to your way to the kingdom." And then there's that moment of silence, and then Jesus, as brutalized as he is, with the little energy that he has, looks up, glances at him, and says, "Amen, I shall remember you and take you to paradise," something along those lines. And it's just so powerful because you think about, how much of you don't really know exactly what he did, the guy on the right or left, like, were they thieves? Were they murderers? But the fact that Jesus just instantly was like, "Hey, I love you. You're part of me. I'm taking you to paradise." It makes you think about the sins that you've committed or I've committed, that we are also worthy of Jesus's love. And I think even the viewer who isn't a believer watching the film could get something out of that scene. It's just so powerful. And I get emotional during movies. I grew up studying acting. I'm a dramatic guy, and I think that scene just really hits me. It just makes me so proud to be a Christian, and just watching that scene just really makes me feel for the two men I even feel for the guy on the left a little bit because he's just so naive, but then he gets what he has coming, and then the crow comes and pecks his eye out, which I don't know if that's biblical. But I think they just did that for Hollywood's sake.
Right, that's a artistic license there.
Yeah. So, but I really think that was probably my favorite scene. I know that was a long description, but I really had to get into that one.
No, yeah. I mean, I think it definitely demonstrates what is essential teaching of Jesus is forgiving people who repent of their sins. Like, as you said, like, we don't know what this guy did. He could have been really been a horrible guy.
Yeah, like terrible guy.
I mean, so yeah, I think it is a powerful scene, indeed. Father, what scene would you say really speaks to you and how it's portrayed?
Yeah, it's hard to beat that one. And that one, like you said, gets to the central message of Christianity. It's about repentance, not so much what's your scorecard, but in life, but what's your attitude towards the end, towards Jesus, and that repentance is important. And it also, Joe, reminds me of the as Warren Zevon would song, don't the trees look like crucified thieves?
Yeah.
That's the incredible song Desperados Under the Eaves. But yeah, it's hard to compete with that one. I think the because you get so drawn into the movie, the scene that I always think of are all the ones towards the beginning. So the Garden of Gethsemane, his Jesus's his anguish at the beginning, and then how the anguish kind of turns into like resolve as the temple guards show up. And I mean, they do such a good job with the cinematography with the torches and coming into this like dark, foggy garden that Jesus has been praying in so intensely. And I actually missed an opportunity to get to the Holy Land with some of my priest friends a couple months back. A group of my priest friends went to the Holy Land, and they were able to go to that Garden of Gethsemane and see where it is in relation to the temple, and how it seems like Jesus may have actually been able to, like, as he's kneeling and praying, might have actually seen these torches heading his way. They're coming for him, and that temptation he must have felt to get out of there, but when he still had an opportunity. But then he's so resolved to do God the Father's will, and only to do, not to go out of his way to avoid his mission. But
and Father, something like, as you're saying, with the temptation in that scene, I think it mirrors the account in Genesis. As he's praying, the devil appears and sends a serpent over to him, and I think it's artistic license, but it's to represent the temptation of Eve, and
Right.
and the temptation to don't give yourself up, do not make the sacrifice,
Right.
get out of it. And then instead of eating the apple, Jesus crushes the head of the serpent that is
Yeah.
coming towards him. And
Right.
I
Such a
think that
dramatic.
that I thought that scene was like the symbolism I thought was very
Right.
great choice for
It's
on the
so
director.
startling too. You don't. You're not thinking that's coming. So it's sort of a startling moment where he steps on the serpent's head.
Mhm.
Yeah. So yeah, it's always those early scenes that kind of stick out to me, um, because then with me, the getting there is always the problem. Once I'm there, I'm okay, but getting somewhere is always the problem. So the Jesus's whole process of like arriving at the moment of the passion, and then just for me as the viewer, getting to that point where I'm going to watch it, because like it is a little difficult to watch that movie sometimes, even after watching it, for 15 years or more now at this point. It is a little bit of like I have to build myself up to it. So like once I get started, I'm usually all right getting into it. But those beginning scenes are kind of poignant to me.
Oh yeah, I mean, and similarly, like the scene that I kind of selected for this episode as one of my favorites, kind of linking back to the Pontius Pilate thing. I mean, as you guys know, I studied political science, so obviously I'm drawn in by the politics of what's going on in the Gospels during the Passion. So I think the trial by the Sanhedrin is very interesting, and something about it that stands out to me. This trial is at nighttime. It's being sort of conducted in secret. You even see a temple guard kind of lie to a legionnaire, these two legionnaires who were saying, what's going on here? And he's like, oh, it's some guy broke a rule about the Sabbath. Don't worry about it. Like it's all good, you know. And what I really like that they depicted, because I think, when we read the Gospels and how they're written, often we'll hear phrases that the Pharisees condemned Jesus, the high priest, the Sanhedrin, right? But the Sanhedrin was a council made up of different people in different factions, and I think this scene really illustrates that. You see, there are members of the Sanhedrin who walk out in protest. There are some that object to the trial, and I think one of them might be Joseph of Arimathea, who we see later, but I don't think he's named. Because there among the Sanhedrin there were followers of Jesus, but there were also Jewish leaders who were not following this new way of what would become Christianity, but they were not hostile. They were just like, let them do what they're doing. Like we'll just so they kind of had a neutral thing. They didn't want to kill him. They were neutral. So, and I think that's really depicted because you see there are guys say this court. They're essentially saying this is a kangaroo court. This is not valid, and that they storm off. And I think you're seeing these factions who are pro Jesus and neutral to Jesus, and the anti-Jesus faction that ends up getting the Romans to execute him. So that to me has always been fascinating because there were different people of different theologies on that council, different dispositions and personalities. So I think that's a good way to show that it wasn't so simple as a unanimous vote and everybody wanted Jesus. It was, it was a political
was
There was a
much
lot
more
of politics in it.
yeah, a lot more complex than we often sometimes think about it. There was a
Mhm.
complicated situation. There was in that scene, one of the members of the Sanhedrin says, like, all I've heard is a bunch of mindless contradictions,
Yeah.
and so when you were talking about like somebody who may not have been necessarily like pro Jesus, but also like I don't see anything here that is merits us executing this or seeking his execution. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's an interesting point. Yeah, there was some people that were like, well, this does not follow our guidelines here.
Yeah.
What we have set up.
Why are you having this trial at this hour? Like what
Yeah,
like what's so I just yeah, that scene really stood out to me, that that there was a lot of politics in this, and it was, I yeah, and of course, as you guys know, I said earlier, it's my degree is in politics, so that's always been part of this story that really fascinates me in understanding. Um, so we talked a little bit about the historicity or the historicalness of the film, and how it relates to the gospel narratives, and artistic license as well. And I kind of want to factor in some cultural impact. So, I mean, Father, like, would you say that a lot of this film is biblically accurate, or is there a little too much
yeah,
artistic license, or is the artistic license okay because it's
yeah.
speculative, like things that were not said or not said?
Yeah, that's a great question, and yeah, I think they did a tremendous job with the research to make sure that it was biblically accurate. They took some artistic license, just calling to mind like some of the things we talked about earlier, like Pilate's wife wiping up the blood along with the other women, or the crow coming down and pecking at the eyes of the one thief. There's I think there's a lot of it there that is just an attempt to help us enter into this in a different, the Gospels are written narratives, so they can only provide us so much, and it seems like most of the Gospels were written by people who were writing in not their native language, and most people in those days didn't write at all. So it seems like it was a very challenging thing, even to get this stuff written down.
Mm.
And in the time, people would tell stories just verbally, and they would be handed down. People could remember verbatim what they heard because their minds were conditioned to the situation at the time. They were able to sort of hear a story, pass it along almost word for word, because so oral tradition was huge back then. So the Gospels, for many reasons, are kind of sparse on a lot of the details. So I think there is some creative license, and I think maybe the part that and I kind of hesitate to say it because I'm not I don't know, but like the uh the degree of the torture that Jesus went through, like especially the scourging scene. I mean, I think the people who made the movie were really trying to bring home the brutality of the time, which I can't go back and understand it, and I'm sure that I would be shocked by it. And I think
Yeah.
they wanted us to be shocked by the brutality, but it's like, would somebody be able to sort of withstand this for so long?
Yeah,
Now,
that was
Jesus
something.
was the one who fasted for 40 days. So people were built differently back then. It's so hard to know, but I think the main thing was they were trying to emphasize the
The
brutality.
suffering, and
Yeah, the
yeah,
suffering of it. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, that was something that I was thinking about while I was watching. I was like, kind of, would he have been able to?
Yeah. Could you withstand so many
Yeah,
times?
if they were beating him the whole way,
Yeah.
But maybe it's for symbolic use of.
Right. It's just I think that back in those days, people were, they were built, their bodies were different just because they were in a different setting, and Jesus must have been a very physically fit and strong
Yeah,
man, given the life he had to live. and so it's just I think they wanted to really bring home the destruction of that person, the way
Well,
that they were
and
doing.
kind of to touch on the brutality, something I was thinking, like there are the Roman soldiers who are clearly the torturers. That's their job, and how sadistic they are. And I was kind of thinking, man, back then, we didn't have like psychology, right? So there were probably like the psychopaths of that time probably ended up working as torturers, and like they would find the people who were really enjoying this, because you see these soldiers are very much taking pleasure in what they're doing. And something really interesting, and Parker, I think you might find this interesting, because Parker and I both lived in Italy together, and I know a little bit of Italian myself. Some of the movie is not subtitled, and actually Mel Gibson was really reluctant to have any of it subtitled. But when the Roman soldiers are speaking in Latin to each other, there was a few times where and it wasn't subtitled. There was a few times that I actually was able to understand what they were saying to each other.
I was curious about that because I didn't know if my TV was working or not.
Yeah,
And then I was like, oh wait, they're speaking a different language, and it sounded like Latin. And
but it's similar to Italian, enough that I was actually able
were
to.
you able to translate some of the things? I maybe got the gist of that. They were just like, oh, let's switch to these weapons. Let's mess them up.
Well, yeah, at one point they say something pretty sadistic. They essentially say we're gonna make music, is what they
Ugh,
say as they are getting their torture devices. But it was something interesting that I was like, Latin really is,
So close to Italian.
yeah, like
You could understand it.
like a little parts, not everything, but I was able to pick up like one like that phrase for sure. I understood exactly what they were saying, and what they were, the euphemism was. But yeah, so all right, so yeah, I mean, so I guess in general it is pretty biblically accurate, and maybe the things that aren't are not necessarily problematic to.
Right. Yes, I would say that I mean, everything that's in that movie, I think, is kind of helping us enter into the reality of that the passion narratives are trying to communicate, trying to communicate to us. And I think it's kind of necessary to supplement what's in there, the details that are in there, with some bringing in like people who understand the historical context, who could kind of help fill in the gaps. Because the Gospels are also probably written with the idea that people are going to be reading this, understanding the context. So much of the Gospels, there's like this some of it kind of seems a little vague or inaccessible to us because we're living in a totally different world. So I think that the filmmakers were trying to help us as people living in the 2000s AD,
The 21st century, right?
21st century, to get a better understanding of what was exactly happening.
So, kind of before we wrap up our discussion on the Passion of the Christ, I want to offer any of you guys any final thoughts or words that you wanted to get into before I have a topic that'll be a little bit lighter to kind of end the episode on a bit of a lighter note. But before we go into that, I wanted to offer both of you guys any chance to have any final thoughts on the film.
I mean, I think. Yeah, sorry about that.
You're good. You're good.
Yeah. Well, I guess I think I just think it's a movie that I try to watch every year right around this time, and it's a movie that something new sticks out to me every time I watch it. Something new catches my attention, because there's so much to take in from that story. So I think what like a final sort of thought is that it's a movie that's, if you've seen it once, it's worth giving it another view, and maybe try to view it once a year.
Hmm. And Parker, did you have something to?
Yeah, I'm kind of with you on what you said, Father. It is a movie I try to watch once a year or once every other year. It is a hard watch for sure. But like you said, you rewatch it and you see things that you missed out on last time. And interesting enough about this movie, there was actually a lot of crazy trivia that happened on the set of The Passion of the Christ. Like, as believers, we would believe it would be spiritual. Some would say it was, paranormal type activity, but like lightning. I think a few people got struck by lightning. A lot of people got hurt. A lot of the actors are claiming a lot of mysterious paranormal type things are happening on the set, which is kind of interesting to think about, that they were making a movie about, Jesus and his crucifixion. And then lastly, there was a time where this movie was the highest grossest film of all time. Now, this was 2004, so more films have gone on top of that ever since then. But the fact that it was the highest grossing film of all time, that's great that people went out and watched this movie. And, of all religions, people of all kinds were watching this movie. And that's pretty cool that Mel Gibson did that for the Hollywood audience rather than like the typical rom-com, which are great. But I think he did this for his own beliefs as well. And I really liked the project, and I think it's one of the best movies made of that time for sure.
All right, yeah, no, yeah. I mean, it was definitely a big major touchstone, and I do know Mel Gibson was really. I think it was a passion project of his. And I think I actually may have read, and I could be wrong. The movie also did very well in some Muslim majority countries because they too they don't believe Jesus is divine or God, but they do see him as a very important prophet. So I had heard that it was also very popular there too. But kind of to wrap us up real briefly, around Christmas time, Father, and around Easter, I find there are a lot of people who like to bring up that some tradition of Easter or Christmas is pagan in origin, as if to just sort of state that, and then like that disproves the holiday. It's almost sort of like internet trolls. So, and it's something that has irritated me for years because it's like, all right, so what if the Christmas tree was for Thor? It clearly isn't anymore. It hasn't been for centuries. They're celebrating the birth of Jesus,
right?
Yeah. It's like kind of like if I eat enchiladas for Easter, that doesn't make me Mexican. You know what I mean? Like, just because you're using a tradition from another culture doesn't mean that you're now that culture. I don't know. It's something that's irritated me. So I guess, how do we combat that internet trolling?
Well, the internet trolling is something I'm not 100% sure what the best strategy for is. I mean, I think maybe even just kind of putting out our own sort of things like this, like this podcast is the best way to do our own sort of. There's actually something I follow on social media called Catholic memes, and that I find they're pretty good about addressing some of the objections to Christianity or Catholicism in a sort of pithy way and in a sort of tongue-in-cheek way and some kind of funny way and hopefully a charitable way. But it is a source of concern for a lot of different people that some of this stuff has pagan origin, whether it's the customs or even they call into question the date of December 25th, and we but we don't really claim to be holding fast to like it's not like Independence Day, July 4th, 1776. That's the Independence Day for the United States of America. We're not really claiming like, okay, we're celebrating this date as the day that Jesus was born, or the Easter, the day that Easter falls is different every year. Like this is the day that Jesus rose. It's more like we believe that Jesus is still present through the rituals and the liturgies, and the tradition of the church has God reveals himself through scripture and tradition and for us. And the tradition of the church is sort of this way in which God organically kind of continues to be in our presence. And he leaves it, he gives us a part to play in that. So the church community kind of establishes, okay, when are we going to celebrate these and commemorate these moments, and liturgically, sacramentally have this representation of these things that did happen once in history. They happened once in history, but because that happened once in history, God is now constantly coming back into our history. And so we're not really, it's okay to not be 100% sure if this is the right date, and it's okay to sort of baptize some of these customs that have happened in the world that may have not have been Christian in origin, but we can make them, we can bring a Christian meaning to them. It's like in Rome. You guys were both in Rome, and like some of those structures that became churches were not always Christian churches, but they may have been some sort of pagan temple or something like that.
Or Easter, we're worshiping Saturn. With that, guys, no,
it's either one or the other.
No, I'm kidding. But Father, thank you so much for joining us, and
thanks for having me.
A happy Easter. Yeah. All the listeners, really hope you have a good Easter holiday. Parker, I don't know if you want to share a little message for the listeners.
Oh, you're offering me an opportunity to share a message?
I said Parker, but
I thought for a second you said Father.
Oh, I was gonna say, are we wrapping up? Because I have one quick point to make about what we just talked about. But if we're wrapping up,
no, all right, yeah, we can make.
I was just gonna say one real quick thing. Like, I think there is a layer of truth to the pagan belief of these holidays. Like, we believe that Christ was born, December 25th, and we just celebrate Christmas, and then the resurrection of Christ for Easter. But we take these symbols like the Christmas tree, the furs, because I know pagans would bring furs into their trees to celebrate Christmas, celebrate eternal life. And if you take like the celebration of the Easter bunny on Easter, I think there is a pagan holiday, Easter, where it would be the celebration of fertility.
Well, I mean, the Easter bunny is clearly the devil, but
yeah. Well, I think that's what they mean by like these are like pagan symbols, but like Father said, we've also adopted practices during these holidays, whereas we also have like the background of why we're actually celebrating it. But then there's also like the new aged way where there's presents involved, and there's cranberry sauce, and I think there's a little bit of layer of truth, but we know the reasons why we celebrate it.
There's what you're saying. These symbols do nothing to contradict what is being celebrated in contemporary time. No, exactly. I agree.
For sure.
But yeah, guys, again, thank you so much. And
thank you, Father Tom. It's great to meet you and pick your brain. Yeah,
thanks I'm gonna take a lot of what I heard tonight and have it sort of inform the way I watch the movie next time.
All right.